Claire told me she was too tired. Too tired to go out. Too tired to talk. Too tired to even stay awake on the couch beside me. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion from work, or stress from her new responsibilities at the office. My name is Alex, and for the past 6 years, Claire and I had built a life together. We shared an apartment, routines, and even habits no one else could notice. But over the past few months, the exhaustion had become permanent, like a wall between us that refused to crumble. It started with small things. A cancelled date here, a skipped dinner there. She would sigh whenever I suggested plans, and when I pressed gently, she'd say, "Alex, I'm just too tired." I tried to rationalize it. Work stress, lack of sleep, maybe she needed space. But something in her eyes told me there was more. A hidden truth she wasn't ready to share. I tried to be patient, to give her room without pushing. But patience has a limit, and the longer the silence stretched, the heavier the tension became. Nights grew lonelier. Conversations became shorter. Kisses felt mechanical. I kept asking myself, when did my wife become a stranger under the same roof? One night, after another week of the same pattern, I decided I couldn't wait silently anymore. I gently confronted her. "Claire, is this just fatigue? Or is there something you're not telling me?" She looked at me, a mixture of guilt and fear in her eyes. She hesitated, fidgeted, and finally whispered, "Alex, I don't think I can be your wife anymore." Those words hit me like a freight train. I wanted to ask why, to beg for an explanation, to understand how someone I loved could decide in silence that our marriage was over. But she wouldn't answer yet. She simply turned away, eyes glistening, voice trembling. The exhaustion I had been seeing for months wasn't from work. It was from the weight of a decision she had carried alone, and now she was ready to let it surface. I sat there, stunned, letting her words sink in. The life I had thought was shared and secure was unraveling in moments, in sighs, in tears. And yet, as I watched her, I realized something crucial. She hadn't done this lightly. She had spent months considering it, carrying the burden of truth that I wasn't yet allowed to see. The story of us, the life we built, was standing at a crossroads, and I had no map. The next few days were a blur. Claire was still present in the apartment, but emotionally, she was miles away. She went through the motions, cooking, tidying up, answering my questions with a polite but distant tone. But the spark, the warmth, the connection that had once defined us, was gone. I tried to talk, to reach her, to pull her back into the life we had shared, but each attempt was met with a quiet, almost invisible wall. I began noticing small things I had overlooked before. The way she avoided eye contact when I mentioned future plans. The subtle hesitation in her voice when she spoke about shared memories. Even the way she held herself, slightly withdrawn, as though bracing for a fall she had already decided on. These weren't just signs of fatigue. They were markers of someone who had emotionally checked out. Friends and family began to notice too. Casual comments turned into pointed questions. "She seems distant," they'd say. "Are you two okay?" And I would smile, nod, and say, "Yeah, she's just tired." But inside, the truth was unraveling faster than I could process. Every ignored call, every delayed response, every sigh added another layer to the wall she had built between us. Then came the day that changed everything. She came home later than usual, her face pale and drawn. I waited for her to speak, waited for the explanation that might restore some sense of normalcy. Instead, she sat across from me, eyes downcast, voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, I can't do this anymore. I've tried to be everything you need, but I can't. I'm not the wife you deserve." Her confession was both a relief and a shock. Relief, because finally, the silence had been broken. Shock, because the truth carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. I wanted to ask her why, how, when she had decided, but I held myself back. I watched her hands fidget, her lips tremble, and I realized that this wasn't a moment of anger or betrayal, it was one of painful honesty. For the first time in months, I truly saw her. Not the exhausted figure pretending for appearances, but the woman I had loved fiercely, the one who had reached her limit and was now being painfully transparent. The crossroads of our life was no longer hidden in gestures or sighs. It was here, in her words, stark and undeniable. And I knew that how I responded in the next moments would define the rest of our story. I took a deep breath and met her gaze. No pleading, no accusations, just clarity. "Claire," I said quietly, "I hear you. I understand that you've reached a point where you can't continue as my wife. But I need to know, what does this mean for us, for everything we've built together?" She looked up, tears brimming but determined. "Alex, I've thought about this for months. I can't pretend anymore. I've given this all I have. But I'm not happy. And more importantly, I don't want to keep you trapped in a marriage that doesn't bring you the love and connection you deserve. I can't be that person for you." Her words cut deep, but there was a strange clarity in them. No games, no hidden motives, just raw honesty. I realized that sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about understanding when it's time to let go. We had shared years, memories, routines, and laughter. But the foundation had shifted, quietly and irreversibly, beneath our feet. I nodded slowly, letting her know I understood, even as my chest tightened. "I appreciate your honesty, Claire. It hurts, yes, but I respect that you can't force something that isn't there anymore. I need to process this, but I want you to know, I won't resent you for your truth." She exhaled, relief washing over her face for the first time in months. "Thank you, Alex. I didn't want to hurt you. I needed to be honest before it became something toxic for both of us." We spent the rest of the evening talking, not about blame or anger, but about closure, understanding, and what comes next. I realized that the silence, the exhaustion, the distance, it was all her way of preparing for this moment, a painful but necessary unraveling. And in the honesty, we found a strange sense of peace, the kind that comes only when truths are finally spoken. As I left our apartment that night, I felt a mixture of grief and clarity. Grief for the life we had lost, for the future we had imagined. Clarity for the boundaries she had set, and for the strength I discovered in myself by listening, observing, and understanding rather than reacting. Sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that set you free. And for both of us, this was the beginning of that freedom.